My son smiled too hard when he said, "Try the gravy, Mom." That's when I knew something was wrong. There was nothing overt, just a glint in his eye, too eager, the way his fingers hovered by my plate like he was waiting for something. He'd never cared about the food before. In fact, most years Jeremy barely acknowledged my presence at Thanksgiving. But this time, he leaned over, all syrupy and sweet, and said, "I made this one just for you. You'll love it. Promise." I didn't even answer. I looked at the gravy, rich, dark, pooling thick over the turkey slice on my plate. And I looked at his wife, Sheila, who was laughing too loudly at something the youngest cousin had said. Her plate sat untouched next to mine. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the years of watching the two of them whisper when they thought I couldn't hear, the way they exchanged glances whenever I brought up my will, my house, or God forbid, my health. I just reached over and switched our plates. Sheila didn't notice. No one noticed, except Jeremy. He stiffened for a second, barely, but I saw it. The fake smile dropped just a fraction, and he said, "Wait, no, Mom, that one's yours." But I'd already taken a bite of her mashed potatoes and nodded politely, like nothing was wrong. 10 minutes later, Sheila complained of stomach pain. 20 minutes after that, she was pale and clutching her gut. At minute 30, we called 911. The rest of the evening unraveled like old yarn. The kids were crying, Jeremy was pacing, and I sat perfectly still at the long oak dining table, sipping cold coffee while the ambulance lights painted the snow outside in frantic flashes of red. No one asked how I felt. No one even remembered it was my plate she ate from. The paramedics said it looked like an allergic reaction. Something sudden and serious. Sheila could barely talk, her face flushed and slick with sweat, but I heard her whisper, "It was the gravy." I looked at Jeremy. He looked at me. Neither of us blinked. I hadn't had a reaction, not a stomach cramp, not a tickle in my throat. And I had more allergies than I could count: seafood, nuts, shellac, even some kinds of mushrooms. At my age, you get used to reading every label and sniffing before sipping. It's second nature. Sheila didn't have allergies, not that I knew of, but she had eaten something that made her body scream. And if that something was in the gravy, my special serving, then what exactly had Jeremy intended? After the ambulance left, I stayed. Everyone else followed to the hospital, or trickled away with excuses and awkward hugs. I stayed and cleaned up. Folded the napkins, rinsed the plates, set aside leftovers. No one offered to help. They never did. The gravy boat was nearly empty. I poured the rest into a mason jar, sealed it tight, and tucked it into the fridge behind the cranberry jelly. Then I sat in the kitchen with the lights off, listening to the quiet. Something inside me had shifted. Not fear. No, I wasn't afraid. But it felt like the moment just before a storm, when the sky turns that strange, heavy gray, and you know the world is about to split open. I'd been blind for too long. I'd let them smile at me with teeth like knives, tell me how grateful they were, how they loved having me there, while maneuvering around me like I was just another piece of furniture from the past they hadn't figured out how to throw out yet. But tonight, I'd seen it clear as day. And for the first time in years, I wasn't going to let it slide. I didn't sleep that night. Not out of worry for Sheila, though I did wonder how she was doing, but because my brain wouldn't stop reassembling the evening, moment by moment, like someone rewinding a tape and looking for the exact second the lie started. The kitchen still smelled faintly of cinnamon and turkey fat. I'd left one lamp on, the old yellow one over the sink, and sat there with a notebook in front of me. Not for writing, just to keep my hands busy, turning pages. I hadn't used it since Derek died. At 2:23 a.m., my phone lit up on the table. A message from Jeremy. Still in ER. She's stable now. I'll keep you updated. No, thanks for staying. No, how are you feeling? No, love you. Just a sterile status update, as if I were some distant relative on a mailing list. I didn't reply. At 3:07, I opened the fridge and took out the mason jar with the leftover gravy. I held it to the light. It looked fine, smelled fine, but something was off. I poured a little onto a plate and stirred it with a spoon. There were specks, not pepper, not thyme. I picked one out with a toothpick and stared at it. Too small to say for sure. But I wasn't imagining things. I rinsed the jar, scrubbed it out, and made a note to call the doctor in the morning. Not for me, I was fine. But I wanted a record. I wanted a trace. The next day, I didn't hear from Jeremy at all. Instead, around noon, I got a call from my granddaughter, Caitlin, 17. Soft voice. Big eyes like her mother, but with the same steady gaze I'd had at her age. Grandma, she whispered, I need to tell you something. I sat down slowly. Go ahead, honey. I don't know if I should. I mean, maybe it's nothing, but yesterday, before dinner, I saw Dad in the kitchen with the gravy. He was adding something. From a little glass bottle. Like a dropper thing. I thought it was spices or something, but my throat tightened. Are you sure? There was a pause. He looked nervous, and when I came in, he jumped. Then he told me to go help set the table. Did your mom see? I don't think so. She was upstairs with Aunt Denise. I thanked her. Told her she did the right thing calling me. Told her not to say anything for now. Not yet. After I hung up, I sat there staring at the wall. Then I stood, opened my filing cabinet, and pulled out the envelope Jeremy had given me last spring. This is just a power of attorney for some hospital paperwork, Mom, he'd said, sliding it across the table with that same boyish smile he'd used in high school when he was trying to hide a failed test. Nothing major, just a precaution, you know, for emergencies. I didn't read it carefully. I trusted him. I'd raised him. I'd bathed him, fed him, taught him how to tie his shoes and ride a bike and tell right from wrong. But suddenly, I remembered the way he pushed me to sign. The second envelope I hadn't asked about. The way Sheila had said, "Good, now that's done," before even glancing inside. I opened the envelope now, hands steady. Read the first page, and then the second. It wasn't just a medical document, it was a durable power of attorney, signed and notarized, giving Jeremy full control over my finances if I were deemed medically unfit. My stomach turned. I flipped to the last page. My signature, shaky and slanted, stared back at me. I hadn't understood what I'd signed. And if that gravy had made me sick, if I'd gone to the hospital, confused, vomiting, disoriented, well, what then? Would they have declared me unfit? Would Jeremy have taken over everything? I felt something inside me settle. Not panic, not fear. Resolution. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. Michael, I said, keeping my voice even, I need you to look at a document for me, and I need to change my power of attorney. Today. There was a pause, then his calm voice. Of course, Mrs. Reynolds. Can you come in this afternoon? I looked at the clock. Yes, I said. I'll be there in an hour. And I was. Because some storms don't announce themselves with thunder. Some just begin, quiet, slow, inevitable, and wash away everything you thought was safe. Michael Adams had been our family lawyer since Derek first drafted a will. Sharp mind, soft voice, always in a charcoal suit that looked too expensive for a man with peeling office paint. When I walked into his downtown building that afternoon, he was already waiting in the hallway. "I took a look at your call notes," he said gently, leading me into his office. "Bring the document?" I handed him the envelope. He read it slowly, adjusting his glasses twice, then held up the final page like it might change if he stared long enough. "Did you understand what you were signing here, Mrs. Reynolds?" "No," I said calmly. "I trusted my son." He nodded once, a flicker of something, pity, anger, crossing his face. "This is a general durable power of attorney, not just for health matters. It gives Jeremy full authority over your finances, property, even decisions about where you live, should you be deemed mentally incapable." I didn't react. I'd already gone cold inside. "Do you feel mentally incapable?" he asked, not smiling. "I drove myself here," I said. "I read the Wall Street Journal this morning, fixed my leaky faucet last week, and made a chess move by mail that's about to ruin a retired engineer in Florida." That made him smile, briefly. "I'd say you're fine," he replied. "Would you like to revoke this?" "I would," I said. "And I'd like to draw up a new one, with my granddaughter Caitlin as sole designee." Michael blinked. "Not Jeremy?" "Not Jeremy." He nodded again, more firmly this time. "We'll also want to create a living will, and I'd recommend a trust if you're ready to talk estate structure." I was ready. More than that, I was certain. We spent the next hour drafting documents. I had him read every word aloud, then read them again myself. He didn't rush me. When it came time to sign, my hand didn't shake once. By the time I left his office, my shoulders felt a little lighter. Back home, I made tea. Sat in the kitchen with the radio on low, the way Derek used to like it. Outside, the wind pushed leaves into slow spirals across the porch. I opened a drawer and pulled out my household ledger. For years, I'd tracked every expense, not out of obsession, but because I believed in accountability. I flipped to the last year and skimmed the pages. $2,000 for Jeremy's new water heater, $600 for Sheila's urgent dental work, $800 for Caitlin's school trip, the only one I didn't resent. And then, the big one, $12,000 last winter to cover emergency repairs on the garage Jeremy never actually fixed. It was all there, in my neat handwriting, every dollar I'd handed over, every time I'd nodded and said, "Of course, dear." I closed the book. Not anymore. At 5:17 p.m., my phone rang. Jeremy. I stared at the screen until it stopped. He didn't leave a message. 5 minutes later, a text came in. "Mom, we need to talk. Are you free tonight?" I didn't reply. At 7:43, Caitlin called. "Grandma," she said softly. "I just wanted to let you know, Dad and Mom are saying you're confused, that maybe you're forgetting things." I felt my pulse slow. "They say it a lot lately," she continued. "Not to your face, but when you're not around. They said you should maybe consider a care home." I closed my eyes. "Thank you for telling me." There was a long silence, then her voice cracked. "I don't think you're confused. I think you're the only one who sees what's happening." "I see it clearly now," I said. "Do you want me to come over?" "No, darling, just keep your ears open, and don't let them scare you." We hung up, and I turned off the lights. In the dark, I stood at the window, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. They thought they were clever. Thought they'd slide me gently into silence, into invisibility, a care home, controlled finances, power of attorney, a staged moment of concern followed by legal takeover. They'd forgotten who I was. I raised a family. I buried a husband. I built a life from scratch with calloused hands and a clear head. And no one, no matter how politely, was going to erase me. I woke early the next morning, not because I had somewhere to be, but because my body didn't know how to sleep past dawn anymore. At 72, you stop waiting for alarm clocks. Your bones do the waking for you. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that reminds you no one's coming down the stairs for breakfast, no one's leaving wet towels in the bathroom or slamming the back door. Just me, the tick of the wall clock, and the old percolator sputtering to life. I poured my coffee, took a seat at the table, and pulled the small red notebook from the drawer. The one I hadn't opened in over a decade. Inside were records, letters, notes, even some receipts I'd tucked away without knowing why. At the time, I'd called it my rainy day file. I suppose, deep down, I knew one day it would pour. There was a sticky note from 3 years ago. "Mom, can you sign this quick? I forgot to submit the city permit for the garage, and they'll fine us if it's late." I'd signed. Of course I had. Who wouldn't help their own son? I dug further. Found another paper folded in thirds. A scanned copy of something he'd emailed me, marked urgent. At the bottom, barely legible, was a line authorizing temporary access to my investment account. Just for some short-term restructuring, he'd said. I hadn't remembered this one. Next, a Christmas card from Sheila, dated 2 years back, with an extra envelope tucked inside. A thank you note, supposedly. But inside was a printed list titled, "Joint Expenses to Reimburse Jeremy, approved by Mom." At the bottom, a signature line. My signature was there. Slanted, rushed. I stared at it for a long time. Then I stood up, pulled the envelope out of the file, and set it aside. If there was going to be a storm, I needed to start gathering the thunder. By 10 o'clock, I was in my car. A dependable 2011 Ford, beige and boring as an unbuttered biscuit. I didn't need flash. I needed reliability. First stop, the bank. The woman at the counter, Megan, was new. Young, pleasant, called me ma'am with that professional sweetness I could smell a mile away. But when I asked to speak to someone about recent withdrawals, she quickly handed me off to a manager. Mr. Lee was maybe 40, maybe younger. He wore a tie with ducks on it and smiled like he was taught to in seminars. But when I told him what I needed, a full review of my last 12 months' activity and any active authorizations on file, the smile dropped a little. "Of course, Mrs. Reynolds. Let me just pull up your account." He clicked and clacked on his keyboard. I watched his eyes move left to right, then pause. Left again. His forehead creased. There are a few active links to third-party accounts. One joint authorization on an auto transfer to an external account in the name of J. Reynolds and S. Reynolds. How much? It's been running monthly, $1,500 on the third, categorized as maintenance support. "Stop it," I said. He blinked. "Excuse me?" "Cancel that transfer immediately, and I want written confirmation." He nodded slowly. "Of course, but, just to clarify, this was authorized under the power of attorney you signed in March." "That document is no longer valid," I said. "I revoked it yesterday. My attorney will send you the new one today." He cleared his throat. "Understood." I leaned forward slightly. "Also, I'd like to restrict all future changes to this account without in-person verification. No online or phone amendments." "Yes, ma'am." Before I left, I asked him to print the last 12 months of transactions. I tucked them into my bag and walked out, not with triumph, but with clarity, like a woman finding her glasses after months of squinting at shadows. Back home, I opened the statements and read them line by line. Dry cleaning, caterers, Amazon orders for electronics, a $300 payment to a photography studio I didn't recognize. At the bottom of one statement, a flagged transaction. Emergency withdrawal, $2,500. I never made that withdrawal. But Jeremy had access then. I looked out the window at the bare maple trees swaying in the wind, and I made another decision. I wasn't going to be the kind of mother who forgave and forgot. Not this time. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was theft. And I was going to treat it as such. Spring that year had come early. The magnolia tree in my yard bloomed in April, a full 3 weeks ahead of schedule. It was the same week Jeremy stopped by unannounced, holding a Starbucks cup and a stack of manila folders, like he'd just walked out of a business meeting. "Mom," he said, all smiles, "you look great. Been gardening?" I remember wiping my hands on my pants and squinting up at him. "You're 2 years late for compliments, Jeremy. What do you want?" He laughed. "Come on. I can't visit my favorite lady without being accused of needing something." But he followed me inside like a man on a mission. "I do need a favor," he said once we were seated at the table. "Nothing complicated. I just need your signature on a couple things. Legalese, you know how it is." He pulled out a folder and laid it flat in front of me. "This one's for the city," he explained, tapping the top page. "Permits for the garage project. Technically, since it's in your name, they want your approval. Stupid bureaucracy." I looked at the page, saw my name typed neatly at the top, the city seal faintly watermarked across the middle. It looked official. Real. "And this one?" I asked as he slid a second form toward me. "That's just a medical release," he said too quickly. "In case anything ever happens to you. You know, God forbid. Hospitals love to have this stuff on file." I frowned. "I already have a living will, Jeremy." "Yeah, but this one's newer, more comprehensive. Mike Adams helped me draw it up. You trust Mike, don't you?" That's when I hesitated. I trusted Mike, but I didn't trust Jeremy's tone. It was too eager. He'd always been a good talker. Got it from his father. But this was something else. Too polished. Too ready. I remember picking up the pen, then putting it down. "Let me read through this one," I said. Jeremy's jaw tightened. Just a flicker. A twitch in the corner of his mouth. "Of course," he said, pushing the folder closer. "Take your time. I'll just refill your coffee." I nodded, but I didn't read it. Not then. Not fully. I skimmed the top few lines, saw the words "durable power of attorney" and "fool that I was." Thought it meant he'd be allowed to speak on my behalf in case I was on a ventilator. Nothing more. So I signed. He left with both folders tucked under his arm, smiling like a man who'd won a bet. Now, sitting at my kitchen table months later with bank statements spread around me like confetti, I saw that moment for what it was. Not love, not concern, preparation. That same week, a letter had arrived from my insurance provider, a notice of change in policy access. I hadn't thought much of it at the time, shuffled it in with junk mail. But now I understood. Jeremy had been laying the groundwork, and I'd walked straight into it. I picked up my phone and called Michael again. "I want to schedule another meeting," I said. "And I want to talk about full asset protection, irrevocable structures, the kind he can't touch." He didn't ask why, just said, "Of course. Tomorrow morning?" "Yes," I said. "First thing." After I hung up, I stood at the sink, looking out at the bare tree limbs against the gray November sky. A wind had picked up, scattering dry leaves across the yard. The air smelled like wood smoke and distance. Jeremy had always been my boy, my miracle baby, after 2 miscarriages and a long string of doctors saying, "unlikely." I'd nursed him through colic, through chickenpox, through his first broken heart when Miranda left him in college. I'd paid off his student loans when he lost his job in 2008, lent him the down payment for their first house, covered their taxes twice, And I'd done it all willingly, but none of it bought loyalty. None of it bought decency. And now that he saw me not as a mother but a hurdle, I owed it to myself to become a wall he couldn't scale. Tomorrow, I'd start building it, brick by brick. And this time, no one was getting over. Michael had rearranged his schedule for me. When I arrived at 9:05 the next morning, he was already in his office with a fresh pot of coffee and a yellow legal pad open on the desk. "You weren't kidding," he said, glancing at the stack of documents I handed over. "You brought evidence." "I brought a pattern," I corrected. "One that's been going on for years, and I just never wanted to look at it closely." We went through it, page by page. Bank statements, the signed but misleading forms, a copy of that Christmas reimbursement list Sheila had slipped me. By the time we reached the bottom of the stack, Michael had taken off his glasses. "Mrs. Reynolds, this is more than negligence. This is exploitation." I nodded. I didn't need a name for it. I just needed a solution. "We can revoke everything already in place, which you've done. That's step one. But I'd suggest you go further." "How far?" "Irrevocable trust. We transfer your assets into it. Your accounts, your house, anything else you want protected. You appoint a trustee, someone you trust, and that trustee manages everything according to your wishes. Jeremy can't touch it. Not now. Not ever. And if something happens to me, your wishes stay in place permanently, no matter what someone tries to claim about your competence." I exhaled slowly. "And who can be trustee?" I asked. "Could be a professional or a family member. Depends on your comfort level." I didn't hesitate. "Caitlin." He looked at me over the rims of his glasses. "Your granddaughter?" "She's the only one who's told me the truth lately, and she's 17, but she's not a child. Not in the ways that matter. Legally, we'll need a co-trustee until she's 18. I can recommend someone neutral." "Do it," I said, "and start the paperwork." While he typed, I glanced around the office. Same mahogany desk, same window view of the courthouse square, same framed picture of his old retriever in the corner. I'd sat in this chair when Derek and I made our first will, when we set up guardianship for Jeremy in case we died early, when we signed the final papers after Derek's heart gave out. But this felt different. This time I wasn't preserving something. I was reclaiming it. When we finished, Michael printed out the preliminary forms. I signed them all. Slowly, carefully. No rushing, no distractions. Just ink and resolve. As I gathered my coat, he stood. "You're doing the right thing," he said gently. "But brace yourself. When people like your son lose access to something they thought was guaranteed, they don't always take it well." "I'm not worried about their feelings," I said. "I'm worried about mine. And I'm tired of being the only one who is." He smiled. Before I left, I handed him one last envelope. "Open this after I leave," I said. "It's my new will. Drafted last year, but I want to finalize it now. Add a clause. If any beneficiary contests the trust or attempts to challenge my mental fitness, they're disinherited." Michael raised an eyebrow. "That's serious." "That's clarity." He nodded, slipped the envelope into a drawer, and walked me to the door. Back home, the phone was ringing before I even took off my coat. Jeremy. I let it ring. Then Sheila. Then Jeremy again. I watched their names flicker on the screen like warnings. Finally, a voicemail. "Mom, we need to talk. What's going on with the bank? They're saying you blocked all transfers. Are you okay? Call me." I didn't. I sat down with my tea, opened the curtains, and let the November light flood the room. It was soft, gray, but honest. I could breathe in it. That afternoon, Caitlin texted, "Just checking in. Everything okay?" I replied, Better than okay. I'm finally building fences they can't climb. She didn't ask what I meant. She just wrote, I'm proud of you, Grandma. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Then I smiled. The first real smile in a long, long time. I didn't wait for an invitation. 2 days later, I drove over to the old neighborhood where I once pushed a stroller along familiar sidewalks and waved to neighbors over picket fences. I pulled into the driveway of Jeremy and Sheila's house, its siding a soft gray now trimmed in white, exactly the kind of house that looked perfect in holiday ads. And I knocked. Sheila answered. She looked tired and thin, her face sharper than I remembered. She said, Hi, Mom. But her voice was flat. Hello, dear, I said. May I come in? She hesitated. I stepped inside anyway. The living room smelled of eucalyptus and new upholstery, and the silence felt a little too heavy. I settled onto a chair near the window, where I used to sit when Caitlin visited on weekends, and looked around. How are you feeling? I asked. She gave me a tight smile. Better. The doctor said it was an allergic reaction. I was lucky. They kept me for observation, but I'm fine now. Good, I nodded. I wanted to see you, just you, so we could talk quietly. That's nice. She shifted in her seat. I just want to clear something up, I said. The night of Thanksgiving, when you felt sick, did you eat the gravy I had? She didn't answer right away. Yes, she said finally. Was it yours? I asked. Or was it prepared by someone else? Jeremy made it, Sheila admitted. But it's the same recipe you always used. You've tasted it. That's right, I said. And I'm glad I did, because I want things to be clear. Her eyes narrowed a little. What I'm clear about is that you got sick. You didn't know why yet, and I didn't either. But something that night changed the rules. She looked down. What I'm also clear about, I continued, is that what I signed months ago gave Jeremy access to things I never meant him to have. And that dish, the gravy, was the moment I realized I couldn't trust convenience anymore. Silence settled between us, thicker than the winter air outside. Mom, Sheila said, voice low, I don't know what you're suggesting. I looked at her. I felt no anger now, just a cold, measured clarity. I'm suggesting we don't pretend anymore. That we stop the pretense of family when the family act is an excuse for a takeover. I paused. I'm suggesting that from now on, I will not be someone you think you can push aside, someone you think you can just work around. Sheila's lips pressed together. Would you like some tea? She asked, voice still distant. No, thank you, I said. But I would like you to understand this. I am not done, not silent, not invisible. I stood up. At 72, I am steady on my feet. I nodded politely. Thank you for letting me come. I walked to the door and paused for a moment. Take care, I said. Not love. Because love had become too heavy a word in this house. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the leaves against the porch. I didn't hurry to my car. I stood there a minute, letting the cold brush my cheeks, listening to the distant hum of traffic and the quiet inside the house behind me. When I drove away, I didn't feel relief. I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Control. Control, and a future I would shape, not one I would endure. The bank manager met me with a firm handshake and a furrow in his brow. He'd received Michael's packet the day before, notarized copies of the new power of attorney, the living will, the trust documents, all airtight. I've reviewed everything, he said, gesturing for me to sit. Everything's in order, Mrs. Reynolds. Effective immediately, the account is under trust protection. Good, I said. Now I'd like to open a new account. He looked up. Additional checking or savings? Neither, I replied. A custodial trust. In my granddaughter's name, Caitlin Reynolds. I'd like to fund it directly from my investment account. He blinked. A trust for education, I said. For whatever future she chooses. And I want it locked. Jeremy Reynolds is not to be granted access or advisory rights. The man nodded slowly. We can do that. We walked through the forms. I was deliberate with each answer. No optional add-ons, no contact sharing, no co-signers. I funded it with the exact amount Jeremy once asked me to invest in a startup that had suspiciously never materialized, $150,000. Caitlin would never ask me for a dime. That's exactly why I wanted her to have it. As we wrapped up, I handed the manager a final document from Michael, a formal revocation of all financial powers granted to Jeremy and Sheila. He filed it silently. Then, just before I stood to leave, I turned to him. Out of curiosity, I asked, if someone were to attempt to access funds using a revoked power of attorney, what happens? He looked slightly uncomfortable. We'd flag the attempt, and, depending on the nature of the document, potentially notify legal counsel. I smiled. Good. By the time I stepped back out into the weak winter sun, I felt 10 pounds lighter. Back home, I made Caitlin's favorite snack, cheddar crackers and apple slices with cinnamon, and called her. She arrived within 30 minutes, breathless and pink-cheeked from the cold, still in her school hoodie, still the only person who walked into my house without checking her phone first. What's going on, Grandma? I handed her the plate, then the folder. She opened it carefully, read the top line. Her eyes widened. I don't understand. Is this? It's yours, I said. For college, for your future, for your freedom. No one can touch it but you. Tears welled up in her eyes. Why? I looked at her, my heart heavy and certain all at once. Because I've watched a lot of people take from me, from this family, from what little dignity we try to keep as women. And you've never taken. You've only tried to understand. She set the folder down and hugged me, tightly. No words. I held her just as tight. For once, I didn't feel like I was giving something away. I felt like I was giving something back, to the right person, at the right time. After she left, I sat in the silence, watching the street lamps flicker on one by one. Jeremy would find out eventually. He'd rage, he'd call, he'd ask questions I no longer had any interest in answering. Let him. I was done explaining myself to people who never listened. Let the man stew in the silence he created. I had other things to do, other people to protect. It didn't take long. The call came just after 6, as I was folding laundry and listening to an old Sinatra record. The phone lit up with Jeremy's name. I let it ring. It rang again, then again. On the 4th try, I answered. Hi, Jeremy. His voice came fast, clipped. Why are there blocks on the accounts? Why is the bank saying I'm not authorized anymore? Because you're not, I said. What the hell is going on, Mom? I didn't respond right away. I walked to the kitchen, set the phone on speaker, and filled the kettle. Did you revoke the power of attorney? Yes. A long silence. You didn't even talk to me about it, he said finally, quieter now. I didn't need to. You're not thinking straight. I smiled faintly. I think more clearly now than I have in years. You're being dramatic. No, I said. I'm being awake. He sighed loudly. Look, I get it. You're upset about Thanksgiving. But this is overreaction. I was trying to make sure you were protected, that your affairs were in order. I'm your son. You tried to take ownership of my life, I said evenly. That's not love. That's control. Mom, don't be ridiculous. I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in months, pity. He still thought he could explain this away. "I've spoken to a lawyer," I said. "Everything's in a trust now. Your name is not on any account. I've made my decisions and they're final." His voice rose. "You're making a mistake. What about the house? What about inheritance?" I laughed softly. "Ah, there it is." He fell silent. "I've left something for Caitlin," I continued. "She knows nothing about the rest. Because there is nothing else. I've kept what I need. I'm not dead yet." Jeremy's voice was tight. "This is unfair. Not as unfair as drugging someone's food to trigger a reaction." "That's insane," he snapped. "You think I tried to poison you?" "I think you added something to that gravy," I said calmly. "Caitlin saw you, and I know what I signed last spring." He didn't answer. The silence on the line was not innocent. "You should be careful, Jeremy," I added, my tone sharpening. "Because now, if anything happens to me, the police will know exactly where to look first." "You wouldn't—" "I already did." Another silence. Then quietly, "Is this how you want to end things?" "I want things to begin again," I said. "Without fear, without manipulation." "And without your family?" "I have Caitlin," I said. "That's more than enough." He hung up. The kettle began to whistle. I took it off the stove and poured the water over a bag of mint tea. My hands were steady. This time I didn't feel empty. I felt clean. The kind of clean that only comes after you've finally thrown away something rotten you should have tossed years ago. The police station smelled like old coffee and old linoleum, the kind of place where people sat on plastic chairs trying not to cry too loudly. I didn't cry. I didn't fidget. I sat with my purse in my lap and my coat buttoned all the way up, like I had for jury duty 10 years ago. When the officer finally came out to meet me, he looked barely older than Caitlin. "Mrs. Reynolds?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes, I'd like to make a report." He guided me into a small interview room with thin walls and a buzzing fluorescent light overhead. I handed him the documents. A copy of the revoked power of attorney, the bank statements, and a written summary Michael had helped me prepare. "This isn't a criminal complaint," I clarified. "Not yet, but I want it on record." The officer, Hernandez, his badge said, flipped through the papers, skimming each page. "I see," he said slowly. "You're saying your son may have attempted to use his authority to access your funds?" "Yes, and he may have tampered with my food during a family gathering. I didn't get sick, but someone else did. Badly." He looked up. "Do you have evidence?" "I have a witness who saw him add something to my plate. And I have motive." The documents I signed gave him full access if I were incapacitated. He exhaled slowly. "That's unusual." "It's predatory," I said. He nodded, scribbling something into a notebook. "We'll take this seriously. I'll file this as a protective record, a matter of potential financial coercion and attempted harm. No charges, but if anything else happens, it'll give us a paper trail." "Good." He paused. "Does your son know you're here?" "I hope so," I said. "Eventually." He didn't smile, but his eyes flickered with something. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. When I got home, the sky was already turning pale orange. November sunsets don't last long, but they linger just enough to cast everything in gold. I stood by the window, watching the bare branches of the maple tree shiver in the cold. Then I made another call. Not to Jeremy, not to Sheila, to Leonard Hayes. Leonard had been Derek's friend once, a retired detective. We'd drifted after Derek passed, like people do. But I still had his number in an old address book. He picked up on the third ring. "Marge?" "Still breathing, Len." He chuckled. "You always had good timing. What's the occasion?" "I need to ask a favor, and I need someone who won't try to talk me out of it." You're in trouble. Not yet, I said, but I want to be ready if it finds me. He was quiet for a second. Then, I'm listening. I told him everything. The gravy, the documents, the bank, the calls. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he said, I've seen this before. Not with you, but this, what they're doing, it's real. It's a slow bleed, dressed up like concern. I need to know what they might do next. They'll get desperate, he said. Try to make you look unstable. Try to isolate you. But they'll be careful now, because they know you're awake. I want to hire you, not as a friend, as a consultant. Someone who can look out for me, legally, informally, whatever it takes. He hesitated. I'm not a licensed PI anymore. I'm not asking for a gun and a badge, I said. I'm asking for backup. Another pause. Then, all right, I'm in. I felt something uncoil in my chest. Not safety, but something close to it. That night, I slept better than I had in months. No sleeping pills, no turning over the same thoughts, just the sound of rain on the roof, and a quiet promise to myself. They started this. I'll finish it. Leonard showed up the next morning with a thermos of black coffee and a folder tucked under his arm. Always hated decaf, he said, handing me the cup. You still take it black? I still take it seriously, I replied. He chuckled, then laid out the contents of the folder across my kitchen table. Clippings, typed notes, a printout of Jeremy's LinkedIn page, updated last week, and a list of known associates. Don't take this the wrong way, Marge, he said, but your son's been busy. Financial restructuring, private consulting gigs, and a rather aggressive push for liquidation on some of his real estate assets. He's getting ready to run, I said. Or to fight? I nodded. Anything else? Leonard hesitated. Then he pulled out a piece of paper and laid it in front of me. It was a printed email from Sheila, dated 2 days ago, addressed to a contact at a local elder care agency. Subject: urgent. Need consultation for cognitive evaluation of aging parent. Body: hi, Diane, reaching out again about my mother-in-law. We're seeing troubling signs of memory lapses and paranoia. Is there a way to initiate a wellness review without her consent? I read it twice. She's laying the foundation, I said quietly. Leonard nodded. They want the courts involved. Force a psychiatric evaluation. Maybe a temporary guardianship. They won't get it, I said. He didn't reply, just tapped the email. You want me to dig deeper? No, I said. I want to answer it. He looked at me. You want to respond to her? Not in writing, I said. In person. That afternoon, I dressed carefully. Not for beauty, though I looked better than I had in weeks, but for clarity. Long coat, low heels, simple blouse, no confusion, no drama. When I rang the doorbell at Jeremy's house, it was Caitlin who opened the door. She blinked in surprise. Grandma? Is your mother home? She hesitated. She's upstairs. Call her. Sheila appeared 5 minutes later, arms crossed, mouth already tight. I don't know what this is about, she began. I handed her a copy of the printed email, watched her face go pale. I know what you're planning, I said, and I want you to hear me clearly. I've already filed a statement with the police. I've transferred my assets. I've secured counsel. I didn't. Don't lie to me, Sheila. It's insulting. She looked over my shoulder, as if hoping Jeremy would swoop in and handle this. He didn't. This isn't about anger, I said. It's about boundaries. You crossed them. And now I'm drawing them with ink and steel. Her voice trembled. We were worried. You were greedy, I said. And now you're scared. That's the first honest feeling I've seen from you in years. She flushed. You think you can just walk in here and threaten me? I'm not threatening you, I said. I'm outliving you. She stared at me, speechless. Caitlin appeared in the hallway behind her, watching silently. "I won't be intimidated," I added, "and I won't be erased. Tell that to your husband." I turned and walked out without waiting for a response. As I reached my car, Caitlin slipped out the front door and ran to me. "Are you okay?" "I'm more than okay," I said, hugging her. "I'm free." She held on longer than usual, and when I pulled away, I saw the flicker of something new in her eyes. Not just love, but pride. The letter came in a pale blue envelope, the kind used for wedding invitations or baby showers. Soft paper, elegant cursive on the front. Margaret Reynolds. No return address. I opened it with my letter opener, slicing neatly across the top. Inside was a single-page letter, typed. No greeting, no sign-off. Just a wall of carefully measured words. "Mrs. Reynolds, this is to inform you that continued defamation of character and false accusations toward members of your family may result in legal action. Your recent visit to our home, including your verbal threats and attempts to intimidate, has been documented. We reserve the right to pursue protective measures if these behaviors continue. Please consider your actions and how they affect those around you. Further escalation will not be tolerated." There was no signature, but I knew whose voice it carried. I folded the letter once, twice, and set it on the table. I didn't react. Not right away. I made tea. I fed the birds. I walked slowly to the mailbox and back. And only then did I sit down and pick up the phone. Leonard answered on the first ring. "She's baiting you," he said flatly when I read it to him. "She wants you to react. To lose your cool? She won't get that. Good. I want to make a move," I said. "Something undeniable." He paused. "Are you sure?" "They think this is a game of shadows. I want to make it public." By that evening, I had done two things. First, I scheduled a consultation with a journalist I trusted, a woman who wrote a series on elder abuse last year. We weren't going to publish anything yet, but I wanted the story ready. Second, I mailed a response. Short, plain, typed. "To whom it may concern, I have retained legal representation. All prior authorizations granted to Jeremy and Sheila Reynolds have been formally revoked and documented. Any attempt to contact me directly or through intermediaries will be treated as harassment and referred to law enforcement. Your intimidation is noted. It changes nothing. Margaret Reynolds." I mailed it the next morning, certified. Then I waited. 3 days passed in silence. On the fourth, a car I didn't recognize pulled into my driveway. Black. New. Windows tinted. I didn't move from the kitchen. The doorbell rang, then rang again. Eventually, it stopped. The car stayed parked for nearly 10 minutes before driving away. Later that afternoon, Caitlin came by. She looked pale. "They told me I'm not allowed to see you anymore," she said quietly, sitting on my couch like she didn't know where to put her hands. "Mom said it's for the best, that you're not stable." My chest ached, not with surprise, but with grief. Grief for what was being taken from her. "You're always welcome here," I said, "but I don't want you caught in the middle." "I don't care," she said. "They don't see what I see." She pulled out her phone, tapped a few times, then showed me a screen. An audio file. "I recorded them," she said, "right after Thanksgiving, when they thought I was in the basement." I pressed play. Sheila's voice, sharp. "It should have been her. I told you not to mix the plates." Jeremy muttering, "She was supposed to be tired, not poisoned. Just enough to raise concern. That doctor said—" I stopped the recording. Caitlin's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't want to ruin everything. But then they started talking about putting you in a home. I got scared. "You did the right thing," I whispered. You're brave." We sat in silence, the weight of her decision sinking into the quiet. Later that night, I called Leonard. "I have the tape," I said. He didn't ask how. He just said, "Then it's time." The next morning, the sky was pale, the kind of November light that made everything look borrowed and soft. I opened the blinds and watched the wisp of smoke from my neighbor's chimney drift across the yard. I sipped my coffee slowly, feeling neither pride nor fear, just an even calm. Then the doorbell rang. I went to the door. 2 uniformed officers stood there. One held a folder, the other a tablet. They said politely, "Mrs. Reynolds, we have a warrant to review you as a potential vulnerable adult." My heart didn't race. It ticked, just like it always had. "On what grounds?" I asked. They showed me the warrant. It said, "Initiated by Adult Protective Services Evaluation Request by family member." My son and daughter-in-law's names were printed. I read it, then closed my eyes for a brief moment. "You may proceed," I said, "but I want my lawyer present." They nodded. "Understood. We'll wait." I closed the door carefully, locked it, and sat at the kitchen table. I picked up the phone, called my lawyer, then called the retired detective. I didn't leave the table until they arrived. At 2 p.m., the officers came back with files. My attorney, Michael, sat beside me, reading as I scanned every page. They listed memory lapses, increasing confusion, and noted that the petitioner believed I might be unable to manage finances. But every line was weighed with lawyers' phrasing, and the evidence came from Sheila, the letter, a few overheard remarks. They hadn't even interviewed me yet. My attorney stood and said firmly, "Mrs. Reynolds will cooperate under her rights, but we need complete transparency and no assumption of incapacity." The officers glanced at each other. "Can we take your bank statements?" one asked. "You already have a copy," I said, "and you'll need a court order for anything further." They left a card on my kitchen counter. After they left, I sat back in my chair. I felt a peace, even as the faint stirring of tension circled outside. I touched the folder in front of me, the audio recording, the bank statements, the trust document. Everything. I called Caitlin. "Grandma?" she said, voice trembly. "They came," I told her. "I know," she said. "I stood on your porch for 20 minutes. I saw." "Thank you, darling." "I don't like it," she whispered. "I know. I'm safe. And so are you." She sighed. "Mom's furious. Dad's hiding. They said you're making a scene." "I'm making a statement, not a scene." "Is this over?" "No," I said. "This is just beginning." 2 days later, the newspaper ran a small story. "Local woman under review for elder care." I printed it and folded it carefully. I read the reporter's name, dated the printout. I added it to my file. I sat in the living room that night, the house quiet but full of presence. The clock ticked. I held the recording in one hand, a pen in the other. I wrote, "If they fail to acknowledge me, I'll show them why they must." The next morning, I sent a copy of one line from the audio recording to my lawyer. It should have been her. "I told you not to mix the plates," he replied. "Understood. This might shift from civil to criminal." I didn't sleep that night either, but this time the darkness was soft. The realization had settled in. I wasn't alone. I was visible, and I was prepared. The car returned a third time that week. I heard the engine before I saw the lights through the curtains. I stood, walked to the window, and looked. The driver sat motionless in the passenger seat. No movement, no door opening. Then it drove away. I did not call the police. I simply watched, because now I knew 2 things. 1, they were afraid of what I would do next. 2, I already had done it. The spring magnolia still hadn't bloomed, but inside, Something long dormant had awakened. A wordless truth. That age is not invisibility. That silence is not safety. And in the quiet ticking of the clock, I heard the promise of dawn. I woke up before the sun. Not from worry this time, but from certainty. I'd spent too long hesitating, too many years hoping people would come around. This wasn't about waiting anymore. It was about naming. At 8:08 a.m., I walked into the office of the county investigator. Michael had sent the file ahead, the audio, the statements, the email from Sheila, the warrant, and my written summary. It was already in a folder on the desk when the investigator greeted me. Her name was Rachel McKee, mid-40s, no-nonsense energy. She didn't offer small talk, just motioned for me to sit. "We've reviewed your materials, Mrs. Reynolds," she said, "and spoken with your attorney. The claim filed against you lacks evidentiary foundation." Meaning? "You're not under any mental fitness review. The request was closed. Permanently." I nodded. "Good. But that's not why you're here." "No," I said. "It isn't." I reached into my bag and placed the audio recording on her desk, then a printout of the transcript, then the affidavit Caitlin had signed. "I want to file a formal complaint. Under oath." Rachel read the top line of the transcript. It should have been her. "I told you not to mix the plates. See." She said nothing for a moment, just adjusted her glasses and looked up at me. "We will open an investigation," she said. "Criminal? That depends on intent and medical evidence, but attempted poisoning is no small matter." I nodded again. "I want them on record. I want them to know I see them." She leaned forward. "Mrs. Reynolds, I need to ask, do you feel safe?" "Yes," I said. "Now I do." When I walked out of the building, the air was crisp and full of dry wind. November had finally turned. The last of the leaves were skittering across sidewalks like warnings that winter didn't care who was ready. That evening, Caitlin came over. She sat on the couch and picked at her nails like she had when she was little. "They're angry," she said softly. "They're not talking to each other." Dad slammed a door. "Mom's threatening to call a lawyer." "She already did," I said. "I think they know it's over," she whispered. I watched her for a moment, then reached for the letter I'd written the night before. "I want you to have this." She took it. "What is it?" "My story," I said. "Start to finish. What they tried to do. What I did to stop them. You can do what you want with it. Keep it, publish it, burn it. But I want you to know you have a history, and it's not made of silence." She read the first few lines, her lips trembling. "I don't want to forget this," she said. "You won't," I told her, "because you're the one who changed it." Later, after she left, I lit a single candle in the kitchen. A tradition from my childhood. One flame to mark a shift. I watched it flicker, steady and small, but determined. Tomorrow, there might be more noise. A letter from a lawyer. A knock on the door. Rumors in town. Let them come. The worst had already happened. They'd shown me who they were. And now I'd shown them who I still am. A woman with her name back. A woman they couldn't write out of the story. I didn't know how silence could feel this full until I had it back. The phone hadn't rung in days. No cars in the driveway. No letters in the mail. No visits. Not from Jeremy. Not from Sheila. Not even from their lawyer. Leonard called once just to say, "The investigation's open. They've been notified. You'll likely hear from the DA next month, but you don't need to do anything else." You did it. I thanked him. I didn't ask what would happen next. I didn't need to. Some fights don't end in a courtroom. Some just end with a door that doesn't open anymore. Caitlin came over that weekend. She brought her sketchbook, 2 bagels, and a quiet smile I hadn't seen in weeks. "They're not talking to me," she said, unwrapping her food. "Mom says I betrayed them." "You told the truth," I said. "Yeah, that's what I told her." We sat at the table like we used to, her drawing while I made tea. Every so often, she'd show me a page, a bird, a hand, an old woman's face half wrapped in branches. "Is that me?" She nodded. "But it's not a prison," she said. "It's a tree. You're still growing." I touched the drawing gently. "You're better than they know." She gave me the smallest smile. When she left, she hugged me hard. "You saved yourself," she whispered. "I just watched." "No," I said. "You reminded me I was still worth saving." That night, I cleaned the house. Not a chore, but a ritual. I opened closets I hadn't touched in years, threw out things that didn't feel like mine anymore, took down the old curtains, packed the porcelain things no one ever used. I found a box of Derek's cufflinks and sat with them for a while. Then I wrote a new will, not out of fear, but out of order. Clean lines, clear gifts. One page. I left the house to Caitlin. I left a small donation to the women's shelter where I used to volunteer. Everything else, every book, every dish, every saved photo, was hers to sort through when I was gone. No one else. In the morning, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself. Not younger, not prettier, but present. I no longer saw the woman they'd tried to make me. Forgetful, burdensome, fading. I saw the woman who had raised a son, buried a husband, survived betrayal, and still stood steady in her own kitchen. That woman was not to be pitied. She was to be remembered. Before breakfast, I walked out onto the porch. The sky was wide and clean. The light had that early winter sharpness, like everything was freshly carved. I held my tea and watched the street. Quiet, still. And then, slowly, I smiled. They wouldn't come back. I didn't want them to, because the life I had now, quiet as it was, finally belonged to me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel old. I felt real. I felt free.